I found out the wedding was canceled while sitting in the parking lot of a carpet warehouse. Not even joking. I was holding a receipt for a $4,200 custom ivory rug, the one she said would tie the whole entryway together. She picked it. I paid for it. I was literally about to load it into my trunk when my phone buzzed. Wedding's off. Expect my lawyer's call. That was it. That was the text. I read it twice. 3 times. I laughed. Out loud. Not because it was funny, but because reality broke for a second. 5 minutes before that, I was trying to pick a doormat. 10 minutes later, I'd pulled out of a mortgage, locked my credit, and canceled a wire transfer she didn't know I'd paused. See, what she didn't realize, what no one realized, was that I'd been waiting for her to snap. And she finally did. For months, things hadn't felt right. She was always tired, always busy, always finding reasons to not talk about the wedding unless it was about napkins, guest counts, or signature cocktails. Nothing emotional, nothing real. But I kept going along with it because I thought, maybe this is just stress. Nope. Turns out it wasn't stress. It was strategy. Because 2 days before her text, a friend of mine, who works in real estate, told me he'd seen her name pop up on a rental lease. A 1-bedroom luxury apartment. Under a different last name. Signed alone. He thought it was weird. I didn't know what to do with that info at the time. Now I did. While she was prepping her exit, I was unknowingly funding her escape pod. House in my name. Wedding mostly paid. Joint account set up, but only I had been depositing. And the best part? She thought I'd crumble. Instead, I made 5 calls from that parking lot. Mortgage agent. Pulled my application, citing personal fraud concerns. Bank. Locked joint account. Froze new withdrawals. Venue. Canceled final payment, citing contract breach. Lawyer my own. Yeah, I have one too, surprise. Rug warehouse. Refund issued. That ugly rug was never coming home. I didn't text her back. I wanted her to sit in that silence. Because that was the day her perfect little plan hit a wall. And I was the one who built it. I didn't go home right away. I parked near the river and just stared at the water like some divorced movie character. Even though technically, I wasn't even married yet. The irony wasn't lost on me. For a while, I didn't feel anything. Then suddenly, everything hit at once. Rage. Embarrassment. Disbelief. How do you go from building a life together to being told, in a text, to expect a lawyer? No warning. No argument. Just a legal threat in Helvetica font. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started snapping into place. A week ago, she'd stopped sharing her calendar with me. Said her phone glitched. 2 weeks before that, she insisted we keep the house utilities in my name until we settle the wedding paperwork. There was even a night last month when I found an unfamiliar hoodie in our coat closet, black and way too big to be hers. She swore it was her brother's. It wasn't. I knew that now. And yet, I hadn't confronted her. I'd let it all slide, telling myself I was paranoid, that I had trust issues. Now I realized those trust issues weren't issues at all. They were instincts, dulled by love and wishful thinking. She wasn't just breaking off the wedding. She was trying to walk away clean, with me holding the financial bag. But she underestimated one thing. I listen for a living. My whole job in IT is noticing when something isn't talking to something else the way it should. That skill doesn't turn off just because you're in love. And I've been noticing for a while now. So when she finally showed her hand, I was already halfway to flipping the board. At home, I opened my laptop and started digging. Not stalking. Researching. First, I checked our shared folders. The wedding planner doc, gone. Her vendor spreadsheets, deleted. But she'd forgotten one thing, revision history. She hadn't deleted them, just moved them, sloppily. And what I found? A spreadsheet labeled Escape Plan, buried in a renamed folder. No joke. That was the actual name. It wasn't a literal plan to flee the country or anything. But it outlined things like who keeps what to say to mutuals, and even a section labeled Public Sympathy Strategy. She was preparing to spin the story like I was unstable, that I'd been controlling, difficult, financially reckless. She was writing the script for a breakup she hadn't even delivered yet. But the part that stopped me cold? There was a tab called Move-In Timeline, and under it was another man's name. First name, Griffin. I didn't know any Griffin, and apparently, I wasn't supposed to. I stared at that name for a long time. Griffin. Just one name, no last name, no context, but enough to unravel the whole lie. The tab in her spreadsheet had notes like, Griffin's lease ends mid-October. Parking pass. Hide until announcement. And worst of all, don't let Caleb suspect before closing date. That line hit like a bat to the ribs. My name, my actual name, listed in her secret escape doc, not as a partner, but as a liability she needed to manage. That's when something inside me broke. Not the kind of break where you cry or scream or throw something. No, it was quieter than that. It was the sound of trust collapsing in a room where no one else is left standing. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. And I wanted it before this Griffin guy took over the life I'd been building like it was some open house he could just walk into. So I did something I'm not entirely proud of, but I'd do it again. I called her sister Meg. Meg and I were never close. She always looked at me like I was a paper plate at a wedding, useful, disposable, and never part of the real silverware. But I also knew Meg loved drama. She hated being left out of a story, especially if it involved secrets. So I called and played dumb. I said, "Hey, just a heads up, Laurel canceled the wedding? I'm still trying to figure out what's going on." She was quiet for a second, not surprised, just calculating. Then she sighed and said, "So she finally did it, huh?" I froze. Did what? Another pause. "Look, Caleb, I'm not supposed to say anything. I mean, I told her this was going to get messy if she didn't tell you herself, but she was convinced she had it all figured out. You know how she gets when she thinks she's ahead of the narrative. Narrative. She actually used that word. Like my life was some podcast she was producing. I asked her, "Who's Griffin?" That's when the tone changed. Meg let out a groan. "Oh my God. She put his name in writing? What an idiot." "Meg, who is he?" She didn't answer right away. Then finally, she said, "Some guy from her last job. They were flirty at first, then I guess it escalated. She said it was just an emotional thing while you were checked out, whatever that means. But then she started talking like she and Griffin were soulmates or some crap. She told me not to worry, that she had a whole transition plan." Transition plan? My fiancée wasn't just cheating. She was project managing it. And Griffin wasn't some random rebound. He was the upgrade she thought she was entitled to. The next chapter she believed she could walk into without consequences, like switching tabs on a browser. But what Laurel didn't know was that I wasn't just sitting in silence. While she was planning her perfect rebrand, I was preparing to pull the curtain, not just on her, but on Griffin too. And when I finally saw his face, let's just say things got a whole lot uglier. After hanging up with Meg, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind stuck in a loop. Griffin, the lease, transition plan, and that spreadsheet like it was some cursed script I'd never auditioned for. It was like watching someone build a new life out of the scraps of your own, piece by piece, while you're still bleeding. But something snapped around 3:40 a.m. I sat up, grabbed my keys, and drove across town like a man possessed. Not to her apartment, no. To the cafe she used to work at before her event design pivot. I remembered something Laurel had said offhand, way back. Griffin always comes in after his gym session. Same oat milk latte, every Tuesday and Thursday. Predictable in the best way. It was Thursday. I parked across the street. Engine off. Hoodie up. I felt like an idiot. Like a teenager on a bad stakeout. But I wasn't wrong. At 7:08 a.m., he showed up. Griffin. I recognized him from her old office holiday photos, the ones I wasn't supposed to notice. Tall, confident, the kind of guy who probably calls waiters boss and doesn't even know how much rent costs. He ordered, sat at the window, and 15 minutes later, Laurel walked in. Not alone. Laughing. Hair down. Wearing the hoodie that belonged to her brother. She sat across from him like she'd done it 100 times before. No tension, no awkwardness. Just easy, practiced comfort. And then he reached across the table and held her hand. That was the moment I realized she hadn't just replaced me. She'd deleted me. Like I was some trial run she'd grown out of. I didn't go in. I didn't confront. I took a photo. Just one. No flash, no drama. Then I drove straight to the bank. I closed the joint account. Froze the wedding fund. Rerouted my paycheck. I didn't say a word to her. Not a single word. Let her wonder where the money went. Let her panic when the florist emails bounce. When the wedding planner texts me and hears back, silence. Because if she was going to treat our life like a project she could shut down, I was going to pull the plug quietly and leave her staring at the blank screen. But the best part? The photo. I wasn't going to post it. I wasn't going to send it. I had a better idea. One that would make everything unravel, not with rage, not with shouting, but with one perfect moment of public exposure. And Laurel was going to deliver it all by herself. 3 days went by. 3 days of pure silence. No calls. No follow-ups. No, hey, just checking if you saw the text about our wedding imploding. Nothing. You'd think after all we'd built, or at least pretended to, she'd feel something. Guilt. Hesitation. A heartbeat. But Laurel was quiet. And I let her be. That silence wasn't empty. It was power. And I wasn't about to waste it. But on the fourth day, she cracked. It started with a missed call. Then two. Then a text. We need to talk. I didn't expect you to act this way. Oh, really? What way did you expect me to act, Laurel? Cry in the foyer of the almost home we never moved into? Offer to still be friends while you skip town with Jim Griffin and your rebrand spreadsheet? I didn't reply. Later that night, she sent another message, longer this time. Look, I know the text was cold. I panicked. It's complicated. I didn't want to hurt you, Caleb. I just needed space to figure things out. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Can we meet? Can we meet? She wanted to meet. Suddenly, her tone had changed, like she realized I wasn't sitting by the phone, waiting to beg for closure. Like maybe, just maybe, her backup plan didn't come with the safety net she expected. So I agreed. Sort of. I told her I'd meet. At a public place, neutral ground. I picked a quiet brunch spot near the park. Somewhere open. Somewhere she couldn't twist the story later and claim I lost it, or got aggressive. I was setting the stage, and she had no idea. When I got there, she was already seated. Sunglasses on, hair tied back like she was about to deliver a press statement. She smiled like nothing had happened. Like we were old friends catching up. The nerve. She started talking fast. Said she just needed clarity. That she wasn't sure about marriage anymore. That things moved too fast. She kept using soft, vague words. Anything but the truth. She never mentioned Griffin. Not once. Never said his name. Never admitted to the spreadsheet. Not a word about the apartment lease I'd seen or the hand-holding cafe session I had a photo of. She talked like someone rehearsing for a story where she got to be the misunderstood lead, and I was just a tragic footnote. But I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I just let her talk. And when she finally stopped and said, I hope you can be mature about this, I nodded. Smiled. Then I slid my phone across the table. On screen, the photo. Her and Griffin. Holding hands. Time-stamped. Clear as daylight. Her face changed instantly. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. Because she realized, in that moment, she didn't control the story anymore. And I wasn't the one spiraling. She was. She didn't say anything at first. Just stared at the photo like she was trying to remember if she'd smiled too much or if the lighting was good enough to claim it was edited. Then she looked at me. No tears, no apology. Just panic trying to dress itself up as confusion. Where did you get that? She asked, like I'd broken into a vault instead of watching her through a cafe window she'd sat behind every Thursday for months. I didn't answer. I just sat there and let her feel it. That slow crawl of dread. That moment when you realize you're not 10 steps ahead. You're standing in a trap you built for someone else. She tried to spin it, of course. Said it was just coffee. Said Griffin was going through something, and she was being a friend. Said I was blowing things out of proportion. But her voice was cracking, and her hands were shaking, and she couldn't even bring herself to say the word fiancé anymore. I let her talk. Again. And then I stood up. You're going to want to get ahead of this, I said. Because someone else already is. She blinked. What are you talking about? I smiled. A real one. First time in weeks. Because the night before, while she was silent and I was supposedly spiraling, I'd had a little conversation of my own with someone Laurel forgot existed. Griffin's wife. Or, more specifically, ex-wife. Her name's Danny. I found her by complete accident. A tagged photo on Griffin's old work account. A birthday post from 2 years ago. A trail of likes and unlikes that led me to a profile full of cryptic captions and suddenly deleted couple shots. I reached out. I didn't accuse, didn't demand anything. Just asked. Hey, weird question. Do you know if Griffin's still married? She responded in less than 10 minutes. We talked for 2 hours. Turns out, Laurel wasn't just breaking my life apart. She'd already broken Danny's. She was the friend from work Griffin had sworn was just intense in meetings. She was the reason Danny had moved out 6 months earlier. And Griffin? He was the kind of guy who didn't end things. He just started new ones and waited for the old ones to rot away quietly. Danny had receipts, voice memos, screenshots, one particularly grotesque Venmo note that still makes me cringe. And she was tired of being quiet. So when I told her what had happened to me, the spreadsheet, the secret lease, the wedding sabotage, she asked if I wanted her help. I didn't need revenge. But Danny? She needed closure. I gave her the photo. And now, sitting across from Laurel at that brunch table, I knew it had already been sent. I leaned in and said, "You should probably warn Griffin. His past is about to show up on his doorstep." Laurel looked like she'd been unplugged. I walked out without another word. Because I wasn't going to end her story. She was going to do that herself, in front of everyone. The thing about people like Laurel is that they're excellent at scripting their own stories, right up until the moment someone else takes the pen. For days, I'd watched her orchestrate her version of the ending. Quiet wedding cancellation, clean financial escape, new man, new apartment, new image. She was going to flip the narrative. I was supposed to be the bitter ex, the immature one. She'd move on gracefully, post cryptic affirmations about new chapters while I faded out like a blurry photo. But she made one critical mistake. She assumed Griffin could manage his messes as well as she managed hers. He couldn't. Danny didn't just confront him. She brought everything. Not in private. She showed up at his gym, mid-shift, with her phone in hand. Voice recordings, screenshots, texts from Laurel, time-stamped, emoji-laced, and unmistakable. She'd had 6 months of confusion and silence bottled up, and now it exploded right in front of his coworkers. From what Danny told me afterward, Griffin tried to deny it, briefly. Then she dropped the photo. The one I took. Him and Laurel at the cafe. Hands clasped like a couple in a rom-com. He went quiet. Dead quiet. 2 hours later, Laurel called me. I let it ring out. Then she called again. And again. 6 times in total. Followed by a single text. "What did you do?" No greeting. No punctuation. Just fear, stripped of all pretense. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Because everything she had tried to keep quiet was now catching fire. And not just privately. Danny posted a long, unfiltered thread online. Not out of spite, but out of survival. She blurred names. Left out specifics. But anyone close to Laurel? They'd recognize the tone. The timing. The pattern. People started connecting dots. A bridesmaid dropped out of the wedding group chat. A mutual friend of ours, someone who had always taken Laurel's side in every argument, suddenly sent me a message that just said, "Wow, I had no idea." Even her sister, Meg, who had once called me a human beige sweater, texted me at midnight. "Laurel's freaking out. You okay?" That's how I knew the narrative had flipped. She'd spent months building this plan, coordinating finances, lining up her escape, writing her clean exit. But she forgot one thing. Stories don't survive on silence. They collapse under it. And as I watched her Instagram go private, and our old wedding registry quietly disappear, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more card left in my hand. Because I hadn't told her what I'd done with the house. A week passed before I heard from her again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a long, meandering email. The kind people write when they're trying to sound in control, but are desperately trying to hold the walls up. She opened with a classic. I didn't handle things the way I should have. She moved on to say she never intended to hurt anyone, and that things got complicated and she wasn't sure what she was doing, but wishes me the best. She didn't mention Griffin. Not once. She also didn't ask about the house. But I knew she would. Because in her mind, that house was still her backup plan. The asset she could maybe circle back to once the smoke cleared. She thought I'd keep it, maybe rent it out, maybe stay in it alone and be a walking reminder of what she left behind. Except, I didn't. I sold it. Fast. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. I didn't want the ghost of her voice in the hallway, or her Pinterest vision board printed into the walls. The moment the mortgage was officially canceled under my name, I listed it. A young couple bought it. Newly engaged. Smiling. Naive in the best way. They didn't know the drama, and I didn't tell them. That place deserved new energy. So did I. And with the deposit refunded, the venue canceled, and our joint account long closed, I had something I hadn't had in months. Clean air. Silence without tension. A phone that didn't vibrate with drama. I started walking again. Real walks. Mornings with coffee, and no one correcting how I held the mug. I visited an art gallery I'd always wanted to see. I reconnected with a cousin I hadn't talked to in years. I finally slept, like really slept, without that awful pit in my chest. And one day, weeks later, I ran into Meg, her sister, at a bookstore of all places. She looked surprised. Maybe because I looked like someone who had survived something instead of being crushed by it. "You look good," she said, like it was a question. I smiled and told her I was. She nodded and said, "She's still trying to spin the story." I shrugged. "Let her. I'm done being in it." That was the last time we spoke. I never replied to Laurel's email. Not because I hate her, but because sometimes the best closure isn't revenge or one last confrontation. It's walking away with your head up, while the person who tried to burn your life down is left watching the flames catch their own plans instead. I didn't lose anything. I got my life back. And this time, it's mine alone.